Hey everybody, welcome back to Avalon, episode 8. And today's episode, we're going to take a step back from our downtown area and focus on something that's been sort of an issue for the past, entire project, really. We haven't had any way of cargo entering our downtown area without actually taking the roads and using our highways. We do have a built-in infrastructure for cargo freight terminals to use the freight trains to get cargo into our downtown area. And if you recall from the very first episode, I talked a little bit about the design behind this, but there's basically two main freight terminals in our downtown area, and these two alone are meant to service pretty much the entire downtown region, the sort of maybe 6 or 7 by 7 block area that is the main core downtown area. And we haven't yet connected this to the outside world or really got it all up and running yet. So today's episode, I want to not only handle that, but really just start focusing on a few of the essentials for our city, things that I haven't really even talked about yet. In fact, you might be wondering, how is the city even functioning right now? Because I don't have any police stations, I don't have any hospitals or incinerator plants, really any of the essentials to run a city. And I actually do. You might have noticed in the past few episodes, maybe whenever I zoom out or whatever, that I did place a road that kind of runs off from the main grid and has a whole bunch of monuments and really just all the utilities that we need. But obviously this is temporary. It was just to get the city running and test out our infrastructure with our population. But now that we're really getting into it, I want to start focusing on making our city more independent and getting all of these things built into the city. So this build will not only be focused on our freight terminal, more specifically this is like the east terminal, or at least it's east of the central point. So not only this big terminal, but it's also going to be sort of a combination of lots of office space, industry jobs. It's a power plant, and it also contains some incinerators. So really it is like a very large industrial complex, and it gives us a pretty awesome opportunity to really try our hand at bringing in that heavy industry feel, using lots of pipes and industrial buildings and things of that nature to really get that kind of aesthetic going. So you can see I started off with the sunken sort of freight terminal here, and this is like I was kind of talking about earlier on. We're doing a lot of staggered heights. So the terminal itself is like sunken into the ground very deep. It's like, I think it's almost 20 meters down at this point. So it's a pretty lower level terminal. Then we have lots of ploppable asphalt. I'm using a lot of these retaining walls to kind of create artificial looking walls and floors and things. And then we go in with some buildings and place these buildings on top and around and inside these things to sort of make the entire thing feel like one big complex. And it's not just going to be the span of this single area here around the freight terminal. It's going to actually cross over our elevated, I guess that's an avenue, but this big avenue that connects up to the highway system. It's going to cross over that, and then we'll have more industry and office space and really the core of our power plant on this other side. So it's really a giant mix of all kinds of different facilities, and it all kind of fits the same industrial feel. Now, getting into the way I'm going to detail this, not only is it very industrial, but I want it to feel like it really is a shipping facility. So all kinds of cargo, all kinds of pallets, and we've got like these fork loaders and forklifts and all these other types of vehicles and things you would use to load on and off all of these pallets and all the supplies. And because it's going to be so busy, and it really will be very, very busy later on, I want it to really feel that way, really look the part, because that's the one thing that I love about adding details and, building your own custom facilities in City Skylines is, if you just play this game vanilla and you just add a freight terminal and it becomes a really big, really core component of your city, you've got all this freight coming out of it, and it's this tiny little terminal. It doesn't really fit the whole feel. So with this setup, we're going to have a really large cargo facility. And we even got Ronix's, at least new at the time of recording, they're not very new anymore, but warehouse buildings, which look absolutely fantastic. And I did stack a few of them side by side, so I'm going to use a few tricks to sort of make it feel like they're all one big building and not just 3 buildings side by side. Lots of pipes and things kind of coming on the outside of it and connecting it to other parts of the buildings. And really the great thing about all these assets is pretty much everything you're seeing in this complex is not only usable and working in the city, but actually contributing to a lot of the things that we really need in this city. One thing being jobs. So you can see down on the bottom where my RCI little bars are, we have this massive demand for industry and office space. And a lot of times when this bar gets to full, or it's really high in demand, it can mean a lot of things, right? It can mean, for one thing, you don't have enough jobs. That's one reason. But also it can mean you don't have enough cargo. So this has been pretty much full for a while now, and mostly because we don't have enough cargo. So when I go to my downtown area, and this is why it was just driving me insane the last few episodes, the entire city is just full of not enough cargo indicators. So that's one reason why that bar would fill up. But we do have plenty of office space. So in theory, what you can do in this game is you can never even zone industry. You could just only zone offices, and then have enough freight terminals and ways for cargo to get into your city to basically fulfill the entire need for cargo without ever actually having industry producing cargo locally. Now, I kind of like the idea of also producing cargo locally. And on top of that, this is funny, right? I've played this game so much. I mean, I don't know, almost like 2,000 hours in this game at this point. And I feel like I should know how these systems work, but no matter what I did, I couldn't get enough cargo to come in with just freight terminals. Like I set down these 2 freight terminals, I had them linked up to the outside connections, I had them supplied with ample power and utilities, and for whatever reason, there just aren't enough cargo trains spawning. And something that I noticed is that if I connect it to more outside connections than just the single one that I connected it to right now, it would seem to spawn more cargo trains, but just not enough. Like I just have so much demand for cargo that I couldn't ever match that with just a freight terminal. So I don't know why. I don't really understand why that doesn't work. But when I started putting down some industry as a test, I just basically zoned some industry off camera and wanted to see what would happen if I did that. Because as some of you may know, industry doesn't just provide jobs, but it actually produces goods that can then be shipped off to, locally to your commercial buildings. So that should in theory fix the problem. And not only did it fix the problem, but more cargo trains started spawning, and not cargo trains going out as exports, but I actually had more imports in my imports tab. So I don't know why having more local goods somehow boosted my imports. I'm not really sure how that works, but either way, the nice thing about all these buildings is a couple of these buildings that I'm plopping down in this facility anyway, just for aesthetics, happen to be industry buildings. So they do actually provide jobs in the industry zone, I guess, or the industry type. So we are getting some local goods produced, and we're getting exports, or imports rather, coming into the city from this freight terminal. So don't ask me why that it works like that, because I don't know. I thought that I did, but I guess I don't. But anyway, now that we got that all sorted out, we do have a working and very, very busy freight terminal that's providing all of the goods we need. And really it's down to detailing it and making the whole facility look like one kind of cohesive piece. So this is where all of our props come into play. This is where a lot of the piping comes into play. I wanted to have pipes going from pretty much every single building to every single other building, so it really feels like the entire thing is one big facility. I also use a lot of decals down here. It's just because we have all of this concrete, and we have all these kind of flat areas that don't necessarily need to be filled, because you'd want to have lots of room down here for all of your trucks coming in and goods going out. So I'll leave some space and just kind of keep it kind of clean down there, mostly just a bunch of decals and whatnot. But getting into this area across the street, this was a lot of fun to make, actually. I I didn't know what I was going to do with this area kind of starting off, but I knew that I wanted this little sunken avenue that's kind of in the middle underneath the highway connection. I wanted that avenue to feel like it was really just surrounded by industry. Like there was just buildings everywhere and lots of pieces that seem like they're part of some sort of power plant, but also lots of office space as if there's some sort of tech hub here, and lots of tech being produced near the goods facility. So that's where this big elevated complex comes from, where I really just used a lot of these parking garages as a way to kind of fill out the bottom pieces of the buildings as they get closer to the lower avenue there, and then have larger office space and larger, even almost skyscrapers coming out of these taller buildings here at the top. And again, this is pretty close to the downtown area. You can see I actually plopped down a few skyscrapers outside of this grid just to kind of plan out how we're going to do this, but I do want this to very cleanly merge into the skyline, even though a lot of it is lower, kind of low to the ground office buildings and even industrial complex buildings. So it's not necessarily a part of the skyline, but it's certainly right on the outskirts of it. So I wanted to have a little bit of that blending in here. I'm kind of moving around a lot here. I'm going back over to the other side now, and I wanted to really integrate these big skyscraper-esque kind of office buildings into this complex here, so I'm throwing in a bunch of pipes again. And I do love the way these pipes look, these gigantic pipe sets that are really the only ones that I could find on the workshop anymore. I know that there were a few other pipe sets that I've had in the past, but I've never had pipe sets that can actually be elevated. They're almost all terrain conforming, which I hate. Like, why would you make a pipe set that conforms to the terrain? It doesn't even make any sense. Like, they should all be like this for sure. So if anyone's ever thinking about making pipe sets in the future, please don't make them conform to terrain, because it's just useless. You can't elevate them if they're going over rough terrain, and there's all this weird, the pipes like do bendy stuff. Like, it's not good. So anyway, this set was totally clutch, like exactly what we needed to build out and make these buildings look nice. I also have two of these skyscrapers side by side, so you can see I'm kind of adding some details to the top of this one, just so that they look like they're one big building and not just two duplicate buildings side by side. I think I did a decent job of kind of masking that, but I didn't, go crazy with it. Just some light details here and there to kind of fill out the top parts of that. Now, getting into this area over here across the street, this was pretty fun to work with. I have this big circular kind of ramp going from underneath where the cargo facility is, and it's a way to get up, I believe, onto the avenues, I think, unless this just goes straight to the highway. I can't remember exactly where this goes, but it was a necessary kind of circling piece that we needed. In fact, I think it does go up to the highway there, but it was necessary to get up to the highway. So, I want to do something kind of creative with it, and it just so happens that this building fits like perfectly in the middle. It's also, I guess, supposed to be part of the nuclear power plant, and it does produce power, so that's pretty neat. That, along with a few other buildings around here, which is why this is also kind of doubling as a power plant. But the awesome thing about this is I tried to make it feel like a central node in this big complex. So there's all these pipes coming out of it in all directions, and it kind of connects to all the different buildings over top of our exit ramp, which I love. I imagine driving underneath that would be really cool. So all these pipes, and what I'm doing also is kind of utilizing these catwalks as sort of a support for the pipes. So it feels like it's all kind of connected together as like one big bridge that sort of goes across different areas. So this was my first kind of go at that, but I'm going to use that quite a bit in future parts of the build to sort of refine the pipes that are floating across, because otherwise they're seemingly unsupported. So it kind of makes sense to have, something there to make it feel a little bit more rigid and like it's actually being supported somehow. Now over here, this was kind of tough to work with. I needed to get this elevated portion that was kind of next to that big dome. It needs to line up with the upper area, the upper avenues that are crossing over here. So I brought this retaining wall all the way down to the bridge here, and then I'm trying to get a lot of these puffable asphalt pieces to kind of fit snugly over here. Obviously, this is just like a totally chaotic point in this complex, and at this point in the build, I was really wondering how I'm going to tie all this together, because I've got all this like mess of different things that are all kind of floating in different areas. And I've said this before. I said this in the most recent, as of now anyway, as of recording this FBS episode, but the one where I built the elevated train station. I think that something that's really cool to do in this game, especially if you like playing it the way that I do, is to sort of embrace these opportunities where you feel like maybe things aren't really coming together, or that it seems like there's just all this impossible, differences and things all not connected yet, and you're kind of intimidated by the idea of making it all look like one big component, and maybe it's not working out the way you thought originally, this is the time that I think you come up with some of the coolest and most unique designs, because you've obviously got something weird going on, right? Or else you wouldn't be in this position in the first place. But if you just kind of push through and you try some things out, some things might not work, and I'm cutting obviously all those out, but I definitely redid this area quite a few times before I was happy with it, and a few times I worked all the way through it, and even at the end I was like, it could have been better, or I could have done things differently. But each time you do that, you learn and you get some ideas as you go. And in the end, I was really happy with how this turned out. I felt like using all these props in this way, and especially what I'm doing right here, actually, I'm going to make this this little like gridded structure, this little girder kind of support. And this is going to go underneath the highway to sort of make it feel like the ramp and the highway itself are kind of connected. But just little things like this that really, I think, tied the whole thing together. This, and especially the pipes with the catwalks to kind of make the facility feel like it was all interconnected in different ways, is sort of the way that I tackled that whole thing. But really what I was trying to get at there was, I think that these opportunities, even if they might seem like they're a lost cause or not going to work out and you're tempted to just kind of restart, or it's not looking good as you go, I feel like this is the time that you really got to just stick with it and kind of imagine the end goal in your head and don't worry about how it's looking as you go, because I was really happy that I continued with this. I almost deleted it so many times, but finishing this thing off, I really, really liked the end result. So anyway, that is our freight facility / power plant thing / incinerator plant, whatever, all of our industry and cargo, all of that kind of wrapped up into one thing, and it takes care of all the stuff that we needed. So we're good to go for the next episode, where we can kind of get back to the downtown area again. But I hope you all enjoyed this one right about at the end of the episode now. So I'm going to sign off now and send you off with some cinematic shots. And of course, feel free to leave some feedback down below what you thought about the episode. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.